Last week, you had names like Kirk Cousins, Ken Walker, Breece Hall, Calvin Ridley, and Tank Dell bust in fantasy football, and they probably cost you a win. Well, this week, I'm bringing you 5 players that could do the same in week 14. We got a hit rate of about 69%. All right, through 13 weeks. So let's keep this baby rolling. The first player that I got bubble guts thinking about putting into my lineups, all right, is Chuba Hubbard at the Philadelphia Eagles. Chuba has been one of the best picks in fantasy football this year, got the contract extension, but I'm telling y'all, this matchup is very worrisome. The Eagles are the 3rd worst matchup for your fantasy running back. I mean, they have shut down big fantasy names throughout the entire season, right? Alvin Kamara had 87 rushing yards, 3.3 yards per carry. Okay, he had 15 fantasy points, but the reality is he had so many dump-off targets, and Chuba's just not that type of guy for this offense with Jonathan Brooks there. Tyrone Tracy held to under 4 yards per carry and 6 fantasy points. Chase Brown held to 2.6 yards per carry. Thank God he got into the end zone. Otherwise, he would have had about 6 fantasy points. Tank Bigsby had 2.7 yards per carry, 2 fantasy points. Rico Dowdle had about 8.6 fantasy points. It's just, there's a lot of running backs that have been shut down against this defense. They have really clicked on all parts of their field. Their secondary is shutting people down. Their defensive line is shutting the run game down. It is so hard to move the ball against these guys and have extended drives. They give up the 7th fewest rushing yards allowed per game at 104 for a total offense. And total yards per game, they give up the fewest to opposing offenses at 282. Again, one of the best defenses in the NFL right now. It doesn't help that the Panthers are the biggest underdogs of the week. They are 12.5-point underdogs. So it's tough to envision the Panthers being able to establish the run deep into the second half. They also have the lowest implied team point total on the week with 17 total points. And, you know, Jonathan Brooks, they drafted him in the 2nd round. He's slowly going to get worked more and more into the rotation. You know, his snap share was under 10% in his first game. Now it's up over 15%, I believe, in his second game. I mean, what happens if, you know, in an offense that, you know, is getting better with Bryce Young, but still, you know, inconsistent? What happens if Jonathan Brooks comes out this week and has 25% of the snaps? I mean, what will that mean in a bad matchup already for Chuba Hubbard? So I'm a little bit worried. I understand there's a lot of buys, and if you have to start him, I get it. But I would rather start names like Isaac Orendo. I know that sounds crazy, but he plays the Bears. He's clearly going to be the guy, in my opinion, on a great offense. I'd rather start him. I'd rather start Tony Pollard. I'd rather start DeAndre Swift. I'd rather start Tyrone Tracy against the Saints. Now, again, I get it. There's a lot of buys. It's by Mageddon, so if you got to put him out there, you know, do your thing, but lower your expectations to like a 10-point performance. And if he doesn't get into the end zone, he's definitely going to bust. The second player that I don't want to put into my lineups, I can't believe these words are coming out of my mouth, but it's time to say, that is DEEBO Samuel. Yep, that is DEEBO Samuel. Facing the Chicago Bears, all right, so it's the 5th worst matchup when you adjust for schedule for your wide receivers. If you look at the Bears defense against number 1 wide receivers this year, Calvin Ridley held to 8 points. Stephon Diggs was held to 7.7 points. Jaden Reed, thank God he got into the end zone because he only had 2 catches for 23 yards. Under 10 PPR points still and got into the end zone. Justin Jefferson, guys, was held to 27 yards. He had under 5 fantasy points. It was his only bust game of the year. Amon-Ra St. Brown had 73 yards, so he had a 12-point floor. But this team is just not allowing a lot of production to the wide receiver position. And quite frankly, I don't know why we should trust DEEBO Samuel at this point. I mean, this team has desperately needed him, right? Brandon Ayuk went down with an injury. CMC's been dealing with an injury. There's been weeks where George Kittle has been missing. But quite frankly, like, how do we trust DEEBO Samuel at this point? He has had every opportunity to produce, but he has now had 3 games in a row where he's been held to lower than 25 scrimmage yards. That's the longest streak of his entire career. 3 games in a row under 25 total yards for DEEBO freaking Samuel. Are you kidding me? I mean, what's happened to our boy? I don't know. Age comes for every man. Maybe that's what's happening. And you know what? Maybe because I'm making this video, maybe this is the week he pops off. All right, maybe this is the week he remembers who he is. And I'm sorry if that's the case, but there's too many red flags. If you have these other names, you can start them instead, in my opinion, like the DeAndre Hopkins, the Jalen Waddles. Yeah, Waddle's been inconsistent, but at least we've seen a ceiling, right? Khalil Shakir's a safer floor, in my opinion. Adam Thielen, who has a terrible matchup against the Eagles. Juwan Jennings, right? In the same game, I'd rather play Juwan Jennings. Brian Thomas, even with Mac Jones as the backup. I think those are better plays this week. All right, the third name that I just do not want to put into my lineup, and I felt the same way last week. We just didn't get a chance to make a video because it was Thanksgiving and, holidays. But Gus Edwards, man, look, I don't trust Gus Edwards even in like good matchups. So I'm certainly not going to trust him in a matchup against the Chiefs, which is the worst matchup for your fantasy running back this year. I mean, guys, they held Derrick Henry in week 1 to 3.5 yards per carry. If he didn't get that touchdown, he would have had about 4 points. Bijan Robinson had 1.9 yards per carry against this defense. J.K. Dobbins had 2.2 under 10 fantasy points. Alexander Madison, who was the starter for the Raiders at the time, averaged 1.1 yards per carry, had 9 fantasy points. A lot of that came through the air. The Chiefs defense this year is top 3 in rushing yards allowed per game, right? 87.8. That's the third fewest. And yards per carry, they only give up 3.7 yards per carry. That's the second lowest in the NFL. And they actually give up the 8th fewest total yards per game. Right now, they're a little bit more vulnerable through the air. So maybe that's where LA decides to attack them. But the issue is Gus Edwards isn't even involved as a pass catcher. He's never had that role in the NFL. There's a year, his entire year of his career where he didn't even have a target, right? He's just not a guy that you target or you scheme up opportunities. And here's the deal. Gus Edwards has been inefficient. He's been efficient. He's been back and forth. He's been up and down. You left, you're right. Katy Perry's song comes to mind. But the thing for me is I think Kamani Vidal could actually develop a role in this offense. If Gus Edwards is mediocre, why not give Kamani Vidal a chance to, see if he could be your future? Because Gus Edwards and J.K. Dobbins are not long-term contracts, right? So that's also a little bit concerning to me. I'd rather start names like Jaylen Warren, Nick Chubb against the Steelers, Rico Dowdle, Rachaad White, Isaac Correndo. I'd rather start those names this week. And we're going to stay in the same matchup for this next one and talk about Isaiah Pacheco versus the Los Angeles Chargers. The Chargers are the 7th worst matchup for your running back. All right, so this year they've held Nick Chubb to like 2.64, 4 points, I think. Tony Pollard had about 10 points. Look, I mean, to be honest, a lot of really good like premier running backs have gone off against this defense, but this really isn't about the matchup. I mean, technically it's not a good matchup, but it's not about the matchup. It's more about the timeshare we might see and you combine that with the matchup, right? I mean, last week in Pacheco's first game back, he was outsnapped by Kareem Hunt 27-26. That's not a surprise, right? But Kareem Hunt had 7 carries. Isaiah Pacheco had 7 carries. Samaje Perine saw action on third downs. So it's a little bit messy right now with 3 running backs in the rotation. I mean, Samaje Perine still had 18 snaps compared to 26 for Isaiah Pacheco. I do believe that Pacheco will lead the backfield in snaps and in opportunities this week, but I don't think Kareem Hunt's going to go away. I don't think Samaje Perine is going to be uninvolved on third downs. So when you have a combination of 3 guys in the backfield and a tougher matchup, the reality for me is unless Pacheco gets into the end zone, I don't think you're going to want to have started him. I'd rather start names like Rachaad White and Aaron Jones if you have them off of a bad game. A Najee Harris, a Chuba Hubbard, who we talked about earlier and we don't like. Isaac Correndo. I'd rather start those names. All right, the 5th player that I'm a little bit nervous to start this week, that is Ced Tilly at the Steelers. And at the time of recording this, I don't know if he's actually going to play or not. He is still in concussion protocol. But if he is back, I know a lot of people probably are desperate for a flex this week with the bye Mageddon. I think there might be better options. Pittsburgh is kind of middle of the pack against wide receivers, but recently this year, I mean, they held CeeDee Lamb to 11 points. They held Garrett Wilson to 13. They held Zay Flowers to 39 yards. If he didn't get that touchdown, it would have been a complete bust. That touchdown gave him 12. He would have had 6 without it. And the Steelers defense this year is top 6 in total yards and total points allowed to opposing offenses. That defense is real tough. I mean, imagine TJ Watt coming off the edge. I know in that snow game, everything went a little crazy and, these Browns wide receivers had a great game, but I just think that they are kind of due for a disappointing game, if you will, with Jameis. So the Browns are also tied for the 2nd lowest implied team point total at 18 points. And this is, it really is less about the matchup and it's more about the emergence of Jerry Jeudy. To be honest, Jerry Jeudy looks fantastic. I mean, I really love this kid coming out of Alabama and never worked in Denver. And he finally looks like the 1st-round wide receiver that he was drafted to be. And if he has a long-term extension and they paid him, a bag in the offseason, why not continue to make him the alpha? Clearly, Jameis Winston loves to target him. So there's just enough that concerns me you know, to say, okay, maybe there's a better option out there. I mean, I'd rather start your Jalen Waddles, your Khalil Shakirs, your Adam Thielens, your Jawan Jennings, your Brian Thomases. You know, if you have those names, I think they're much better options. You know, and again, if you have a tough start sit decision this week, you know, maybe there's a player on today's video that you planned on starting and you want to know if you have a better option, then check out the pinned comment. You can access me and ask me a question about fantasy to start sit, trade, you know, super message, whatever. You can ask any of that through our website in the pinned comment. And while you're over there on the Flock site, you can actually get a free account with the promo code LAND, LAND. And when you sign up for a free account with our promo code, you'll get the My Teams feature, the expert consensus rankings, and the trade calculator all for free just by becoming a free member with our promo code. I appreciate y'all for watching the video. Look, I feel like I have to say this because people always, you know, they think I have a crystal ball. Guess what? I don't. All right. You and I are not that different, guys. I just spend way too much time researching NFL, researching fantasy football, researching matchups and weather and everything in between, and snap shares and opportunities. So I don't have a crystal ball. Someone on this list is probably going to go off, but there's enough rationale behind these takes, in my opinion, to look for alternate options. So, you know, let's see what happens this week. I appreciate y'all watching the video, and good luck this week. I know it's a crucial week to get into the playoffs. All love. Now that those idiots are done talking, who needs some rankings?
Hell yeah, I need some rankings.
Then use promo code LAND, LAND, for 30% off any membership at flockfantasy.com.
Oh.